The Super Bowl, one of the biggest sporting events in the world. Certainly the biggest event here in America in regards to sports. No question, no other sporting event can get even close. When looking at the top 10 most watched events on television, the Super Bowl has 8 of the 10 spots on this list. And the second most watched was Super Bowl 57, this last Super Bowl, which was in February of this year. With over 115 million people watching, it was only 10 million off from the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, which is insane. So to say that the Super Bowl is a big deal is a massive understatement, but despite the massive viewers and attention the Super Bowl nowadays attracts, there is one Super Bowl that stands out in regards of the importance of the event and changed the NFL landscape. Without it, the NFL would look completely different and it would be unrecognizable. This was Super Bowl III. Yeah, it's an older Super Bowl, what did you expect? This game was certainly not the flashiest one of the bunch, but this is the important Super Bowl when it comes to impact it left on the game. You can make the argument for Super Bowl I since it was the first, but it was Super Bowl III that really changed everything and made the NFL what it is today, and certainly made the Super Bowl what it is today. Super Bowl III is more important than you think. The unification of the NFL, the amazing underdog story you won't believe, topping it off with one of the most satisfying moments in NFL history. The bold statement that shook the world before the game and surprised everyone, record-setting contracts. This is a story worth diving into, as we will be diving into the importance of Super Bowl III. For this story, we need to go way back. Now, the Super Bowl III was originally in 1969, but we need to go back a little further to the year 1960. This was important due to the birth of the American Football League, or better known to some as the AFL. You see, back during this time, the well-established NFL only consisted of 13 teams at the time, including the brand new Dallas Cowboys, and the AFL was automatically considered the rival league right off the bat. The NFL had a sort of monopoly on professional football, and the AFL had to not only find people to watch their games, but get players on their team's rosters, as the NFL had more money to draft players from these massive schools, and usually get the best. To counter this, the AFL had to go to much smaller schools in order to find some diamond in the rough talent. This included much smaller universities, less popular state schools, and HBCUs, as the NFL never really targeted those schools. The AFL later established themselves to be the smaller alternative to the NFL, and with a massive TV contract with ABC for almost $11 million at the time, the AFL started to get some serious notice from the NFL. But this was not enough during this time. The AFL and the NFL never played against each other, and many people felt like the AFL was inferior to the NFL due to a lack of superstar talent. The AFL had to make a big splash, and they did so with the New York Jets of the AFL managed to sign Alabama star Joe Namath to the then biggest contract ever between the leagues in 1965 for $400,000. I know that is like not a lot for an NFL rookie in today's economy, but keep in mind this was in 1965, and that $400,000 is worth about $3.8 million, which is pretty good for a rookie. No player during this time was getting paid like millions of dollars. Even Hall of Famers like Johnny Unitas, who was an established generational talent, was making less than Namath, to put it in perspective, which is a big deal, at least during that time. With this massive haul, the AFL got a lot of attention, and tipping the power to them, and the NFL had to respond quickly, and that same year offered a merger deal to the AFL, and they accepted. Thus, the modern NFL was born. However, there was a catch. The deal, if the AFL could not provide competition to the NFL, the contract they were putting up would eventually get nullified. And in order to test the NFL versus the AFL, their teams would play against each other in the World Championship game, otherwise known as the Super Bowl. The merger stipulation was because of the lingering fear that the AFL would not be enough competition for the NFL, and fans of the leagues would not be entertained by a simple blowout. This fear would later be realized in 1966 during the first Super Bowl as the NFL's Green Bay Packers destroyed the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl I. And a year later, the Packers would repeat again and stomp the AFL's Oakland Raiders in Super Bowl II. Now, we are in 1968, and their merger is in jeopardy. The NFL was clearly the better conference, and the AFL stood no chance. An AFL team winning the Super Bowl would be huge for the AFL and turn the tide in their favor and keep the merger, and they needed something big or it was all over. The AFL needed one of their teams to make something happen, and something came with the New York Jets. The Jets in 1968 were nothing short of spectacular near the end of their season, as they had one of the best defenses in the league that year. And the offense, led by Namath, was, although pretty spotty, it got them through the year. Namath's inconsistency initially was killing the Jets, but Joe Namath, after taking a step back and letting his defense work, he found his stride. Only losing one more game throughout the rest of the season to an 11-3 record, and after a very close call in their championship game against the Raiders, the Jets would represent the AFL in the third Super Bowl. Despite the high difficulty the Jets had with the Raiders, it was nothing to what was in store for them in the Super Bowl, the Baltimore Colts. This team was considered not only the best team in the NFL as they tore up the rest of the league with an 11-1 record, but many considered them to be the best team of the decade. With not just the best defense, but also offense in the league, the Colts were a juggernaut. This team had multiple Hall of Famers, All-Pros, and Pro Bowlers on their team, led by quarterback duo Earl Morrall, who was the MVP of the league, and the all-time great Johnny Unitas, who was easily the best player of the decade. Many people of the NFL would think this would be an easy win for the Colts. Legendary head coach Vince Lombardi believed that there was zero chance of the Colts losing, and the rest of the league thought so, as the Colts were a 19.5-point favorites to win this game. Now, like I said earlier, during this time the AFL had 3 years to prove themselves against the NFL, and this was the final year and not much was shown. The NFL was just too good for the AFL, as they were down to their last hope. A pretty good Jets team versus the best team of all time? How was this going to be a game, and why would anybody would want to watch this potential bloodbath? Well, Jets quarterback Joe Namath would make the statement that would shock the world.
That the Jets are going to win. He doesn't even predict it. He said, I guarantee a Jet victory.
That's right. Joe Namath not only just promised a win against the Colts, he guaranteed it. This statement was spread a day later, and every journalist and media company reported on this statement. And when looking back on this has to be, to even today's standards, the most bold sports statement given the circumstance I have ever heard. So the game was set. The New York Jets versus the Baltimore Colts. We are here, January 12th, 1969, Super Bowl III. And although the day started off slow for the Jets, the Colts managed to get to the Jets' 20-yard line multiple times, but either kicked a field goal or turned the ball over. Their first drive, the Colts missed a field goal, and the Jets would later turn the ball over on a fumble, making the first quarter 0-0. But that was the last time the Colts would have any momentum, because the Jets put on the ultimate defensive masterpiece, forcing 5 total turnovers, 1 fumble, and 4 interceptions. The Colts' Earl Morrall was not playing well at all. He was doing so bad that Johnny Unitas, who was injured at the time, hence Morrall starting in the first place, he also threw an interception as well. The Jets played some classic football against the Colts, making small runs and keeping the possession most of the game. The Colts never scored a touchdown. And before you know it, the final seconds ticked down and the Jets won 16-7, capping the greatest upset in the entire league. And Joe Namath and the Jets shocked the world once again. It's over. The Jets pulled off the biggest upset in Super Bowl history. And I think everybody has seen the photo or clip of Joe Namath walking off the field holding the one at least once, and it was a crazy moment for everybody. The NFL, which was considered the best and arguably their best team it produced, was stomped by the Jets of all teams. Well, now what? Because of this win, the merger avoidance was later held off. Many AFL teams got a lot of respect, and not only that, but the Kansas City Chiefs of the AFL would later go on to win Super Bowl IV against the Vikings, and thus the merger would go through and the AFL and the NFL would later merge completely and becoming what it is today. The Colts would later go on to win the 5th Super Bowl against the Cowboys, but then go on a drought. Johnny Unitas would later retire in 1972. As for Earl Morrall, things would actually kind of work out for him as he left for the Miami Dolphins and later won the Super Bowl with them in Super Bowl VII. As for Namath, he never got to another Super Bowl and later retired in 1977, but before that, making 5 Pro Bowls and having an All-Pro selection, as long as making the Hall of Fame in 1985. Now, why is Super Bowl III important to the NFL? Well, in regards of the impact Super Bowl III had on the AFL, it was massive. They earned a lot of respect out of the NFL and were seen as true contenders to them. And with another AFL Super Bowl win from the Chiefs, it just hammered the message in even more, further leading to the merger being completely fulfilled. As for the impact it had in the NFL, this meant more teams and more locations, expanding the league and its reach everywhere around the country. With more eyes on the league, it started to boom in popularity, which in turn made not only the NFL popular, but the Super Bowl got popularity shortly after, and now here we are. I would say that Super Bowl III started all of this. Sure, the NFL was already popular, but I feel with the addition of the extra league on the merger, it upped the competition and thus created a better product. More teams means that no league would have to fight over college draft picks to the extent the NFL and the AFL did. Everything was in one place, and now look at the NFL. All of these teams like the Buffalo Bills, New York Jets, New England Patriots, Denver Broncos, Oakland Raiders, well, I guess now it's the Las Vegas Raiders, but you get the point. The Los Angeles Chargers, Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphins, Cincinnati Bengals, and the Houston Oilers. All of them would not be a thing without the AFL. I mean, if you're a fan of those teams, well then there you go. They would have not been a thing without the merger. Super Bowl III left a huge impact on the league because of the stakes on the line and the events that followed it. But the whole lead up to the game was more legendary than the game itself. Namath's guarantee, the classic walk-off are the two biggest things when I think of Super Bowl III. But this is just my personal opinion. I do think Super Bowl III was the most important Super Bowl in NFL history. And hopefully I was able to shine a new light on the game. I learned a lot from researching the game, and hopefully you learned something as well, but I don't know. I would say that Super Bowl III was the birth of a better NFL. Thanks for watching.